Next up is my piece, Comparative Views. What's being compared here is how people view notation of some musical material and how they then interpret it. And rather like the Louis Couperin piece did not provide information about timings, this piece doesn't really provide much information about pitch or harmony. It provides a complete notation of some material which is in a fairly minimalistic way repeated many times, but the precise pitches, the combinations of notes are not defined. You could say there's a kind of contour of up and down, which is implied, but even what register in which it is to be played is not specified, and so can be interpreted differently by the piano, which can also play multiple notes at once, of course, and by the trumpet and the saxophone. So in comparative views, we're approaching how to make melodic structure and harmonic structure from some simple guidelines. This piece is a bit of a tribute to the Dutch composer Louis Andriessen, who has made many pieces which have some of these features that I've just described, and very influential pieces he's made. But we're using it in a much more flexible, I suppose, improvised way than most of the interpretations of his pieces evince. So I think you'll find this interesting and, although quite repetitive, maybe quite addictive. I hope so. So here it is anyway, Comparative Views.
next piece, Heimlich, unheimlich, was an offshoot of a larger project I was working on with the artist Sieglinde Karl-Spence for an art gallery exhibition in Sydney. The video piece you're about to see was included in the exhibition, but was only part of it. Working with visual artists or musicians takes me into other artistic domains. It extends the kinds of meanings and effects I can create, because visual images and sounds create meanings in different ways from words. For example, visual images can represent objects and events more easily than words. A photograph or a drawing of a chair conjures up that chair much more directly than a verbal description of it. On the other hand, most sounds are even more indirect than words. It can be very difficult to say what a particular sound means in terms of how it relates to the real world. We do find music very meaningful, but what it means to us is often very subjective. Heimlich, unheimlich uses the contrasting childhoods of Sieglinde and me as a starting point. The process of making it consisted in sharing our family photographs and also memories of our childhoods and families. However, we were not trying to write a memoir. The work falls into the category of what is known as autofiction. That is, it combines autobiography and fiction. Sieglinde used the family photographs together with other objects, such as flowers or birds or buildings, to create collages. I wrote poems which tell stories, but are also often like collages. That is, they piece together lots of different ideas taken from different contexts. Consequently, they move quickly from one idea to the next and between different times and places. The piece focuses on two characters who have names related to different kinds of cloth. One is Hazel, a German girl born towards the end of the Second World War, whose father fought in the German army. She migrates with her family to Australia when she's still a child and eventually becomes an artist. The other is Muslin, who is born into a Jewish family in England after the war. She is a violinist who subsequently becomes a poet and migrates to Australia as an adult. Her family is preoccupied with preserving a Jewish ethnicity and avoiding anti-Semitism. Her relatives live in the shadow of the Holocaust and are unforgiving of Nazi Germany. Both Hessian and Muslin are shaped by, but also rebel against, the cultural environments in which they grow up. Although Heimlich, unheimlich highlights Muslin and Hessian's different backgrounds, it suggests affinities between them, intertwining and reconciling their different childhoods. It explores, through texts and images, the intergenerational after effects of the Second World War, the blending of personal and historical trauma, belonging and migration. It has considerable relevance to contemporary Australian and global issues concerning war, migration, and ethnic identity. The performance aspects of Heimlich, unheimlich are embedded in a score written by Roger. Like our multimedia pieces, some elements of the piece are fixed, some are unfixed. In this piece, Roger sets out material for the saxophone and trumpet to play, which is to be used as a basis for the improvisation. The saxophone is allocated material that is identified with the character of Muslin. The trumpet is given material that is identified with Hessian. Otherwise, the score sets out the structure of the piece in sections, delineating who should play or speak when. Other than that, the performers are free to improvise as they wish, but again, as in our other multimedia pieces, they are responding not only to each other, but to the visual images and words. In particular, the images are algorithmically organized. That means that each time we run the piece, the order of the images will change.
Names in the family tree Muslim has never even heard about. Places she does not know. Accompanies, Vilnius, Kretinga, they are just names to her. A family tree is a set of tags. It does not disclose the lives of the people to whom the names belong, what they were like, the homes from which they were torn. There are dead shoots amongst the buds, messed up blossoms that have fallen off, moist soil clinging to straggly roots. She scrutinises the photographs of her great-grandparents. They look like aliens, but also welcoming. Names repeat themselves like automated phone calls through the generations. She remembers her mother, sowing the seed of death in her, telling her how her great-grandmother lost her daughter and afterwards did not smile for a year. Her grandfather's homestead ripped by fire in Lithuania. She wants to memorialise these people, but also knows that a family passport does not necessarily mean a common cause. Her grandfather wrote his memoir. No one would publish it. Now it is on the internet, archiving an extinguished way of life. How euphoric he would have been to know his words were evergreen. Memory is bricolage, not reproduction. Scraps, scribblings, shred, slivers, mix, reassemble. Memory is a collage, not a video recorder. Slabs from several separate quarries slip and slide into a single building. Such slabs predict towering stone walls, less accurately, more readily. From rubble to reliving. The city fitted out with carpets of rubble, the splintered remains of cups and saucers, the arms and legs of psychotic buildings severed from their familial torsos. Windows punched through, victims of a boozy fight, roofs that have aerobically lifted themselves off, facades masking as theatrical props. Generation after generation pounded and pummeled the Nazi era, hoping for a knockout blow, but the past always picked itself up. The Baader-Meinhof gang, children of a nauseous past, declared war on fascist imperialism. They thought fighting it would free them, but history is a sly bully and seriously unforgiving. However much Hessian burrowed, she could not remember the moment of her conception, nor could she tell the story of her birth. But she did know that the day she arrived was marked by a giant-size absence, a large, non-fillable hole. The Germans had lost Leningrad and were retreating. Later, when she visualised her father, he was always walking backwards, away, becoming more distant, his blurred face still holding her gaze. Years later in Grafton, bamboo bending in the wind. The White Rose, 1943, the year of her birth. Non-violent fighters, they were slaughtered. Her mother is 20 when she gives birth to her. She is so afraid and homesick that she scratches on the wallpaper of her tiny room on top of the Gaststätte. She is taken in a cradle to the air raid shelter under the house, a raid on the inarticulate, an assault on guilt and innocence, plundering simultaneity.
Unheimlich. Heimlich.
When I am dead, will I still be mouthing poems? I discovered that they had a child who died. Remember me, but forget my fate. Immersed in my performance, I had a sudden memory lapse. My shame refused to lie down. How did you know how to write? Who told you what to do? Creativity was a formula her mother thought, acquired through osmotic touch. Jewishness hung heavily about her, a cumbersome overcoat. Sometimes an embrace felt more like suffocation. The fog of war curls round the fresh breath of thought. My first published poem had a typo in it that decimated the flow. The art of performance thrilled but scared me. Snakes twined round my legs. Meanwhile, your grandfather shows his love for you by chasing you with an axe. My aunt was bipolar and liaised between behavioural extremes. It's better to marry someone you dislike than not to marry, her mother said. Outrages came and went, outtakes from a forgotten filming. Your father fought in the German army. Why hadn't I realised that? My mother's boyfriends wrote sentimental love poems from their billets. You furtively ate the salami, followed by a resounding slap. The art of listening has never been more unfashionable. About your own culture, you know too much, and yet too little. Each aunt, a silent heroine, hands down a legacy of hiding.
The friendly. Heimlich as home, the warm, the friendly, the intimate.
You pick images as if they were needles falling snow-like in a digital garden. Pasts and presents hold hands or put up fists for a chilling fight. Footage of the coiffured family, profiles at carefully manicured angles, burn from the stubborn soil of family life.
Unheimlich.
You try the images on like torn, transparent overcoats, blur, amplify the garments underneath. A photograph of a young violinist, bones you gathered in Tasmania, feathers from the wings of rainbow lorikeets. Strangers locked together in transient monogamy, errant songfulness. Aunts and uncles stare us down expectantly from chaotic family albums, determined to have their say but not to gift us too much, claiming a bond we sometimes invite, sometimes repel. Studied smiles mask craggy marriages, queasy ruptures, mealy-mouthed collisions. Combat spreads beyond the frame that holds it, character diffused in the oozing stench of context. Young faces reassert swarms of former selves. The sealed secrets and desires focus struggles to expose. Heat beyond fire, salt beyond seasoning. We look for what we cannot find. We dig for what we think we need to know. But what we cannot apprehend eludes us.
Hi, I'm Greg White, an austraLYSIS collaborator for 30 years. I have a particular interest in the convergence of composition, performance and production in real-time software environments, the topic of my PhD. Blue Note is for jazz ensemble, sax, trumpet, piano and a virtual rhythm section realised by a laptop performer. For the virtual rhythm section, bass and drum samples are triggered by an algorithmic event generator with an interface for selective parameter control by the laptop performer. For the algorithmic event generator, Brownian motion was selected by ear from other probability functions for its more jazz-like melodic and rhythmic output. However, the algorithm does not attempt to emulate melodic, harmonic, or tempo-based patterns. It uses bass and drum samples to create the sonic impression of a rhythm section with characteristic dynamic and textural gestures, achieved by combining software virtuosity with real-time parameter control. In his Gendi software in 1991, Xenakis employed stochastic processes to specify the sonic palette and dynamically define all micro and macro transformations. Blue Note takes inspiration from Xenakis, although macro processes to integrate acoustic and electroacoustic elements are dynamically controlled by a laptop performer. Therefore, jazz and blues are not embedded in the generative algorithms, but they are deeply integrated by the experienced improvisers themselves. I'll briefly demonstrate the virtual rhythm section setup and interface. Here's the control panel for the drums with 4 layers. This is written in Max. I've written it in Max and embedded it in Ableton Live, which enables me to play with the MIDI control surface, play live if I need to, or with the algorithm. And the interface has controls for macro structures where multiple parameters are changed simultaneously. And also individual parameter controls, say adding a crash cymbal to this channel, this layer. Okay, or maybe changing the speed of the hi-hat. Here's the bass control panel, once again written in Max and embedded in Live. I can play bass from the control surface or with the algorithm. And there are macro controls or micro controls. Once familiar with these controls, the laptop performer can shape micro and macro structures within the virtual rhythm section in an effective and even virtuosic improvisation with expert and sympathetic acoustic performers.
Hi again. So we've come to the end of our 5 videos of new music and new media performance, reflecting influences from the 17th to the 21st century, and involving human-human and human-machine interactions to make the music and the new media. I hope it's obvious now that those two combinations of possibilities provide an infinite array of future openings for creative work. And I hope that the videos, including the science discussion one, have given you some new insights and maybe even new interests and enthusiasms for this kind of work and its emotional expression and possibility. It's certainly crucial to us, so I hope it might be more so to you in the future. Thanks for watching.